Media. Double, double, toil and trouble. Fire burn and cauldron bubble. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi.
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this crammed adventure. That's right, crammed. Okay, so crammed for me because it feels very crammed. It feels very last minute. It feels like I'm rushed to get this done for our regular weekly release schedule. And only because I had wanted to get this done a week ago, but I didn't have time because, all the excuses. I was actually, preparing for a trip to New York, and I just got back late last night. So, it just feels rushed. I don't feel as prepared as I wanted to feel. Because I had wanted more lead time into it. But anyways, regardless of all that, we got it released, right? If you're listening to this, then we released it on time. But it definitely, in the production of it, it feels very crammed. Now, also, the episode that we're going to be discussing today, Ahsoka Part 2, is very crammed. And not in a negative way, right? Not like the internal challenges and struggles I'm facing right now. But the episode itself is crammed. It's so packed full of stuff. There's so much plot, which is awesome. There's a lot of backstory. That's great. It catches us up on what's been going on. But there's also a lot of subtext, right? In the conversations and interactions between characters, especially between Ahsoka and Sabine, who'll be, again, the focal point for today's episode. It's crammed in the sense that there's a lot of loaded conversations, there's a lot of loaded language and interactions between the two. And so as then referencing back to the introduction for today's episode, Toil and Trouble, the quote from Shakespeare, Macbeth, there is a lot brewing here in this episode. Again, from the plot standpoint, we have, Baylan and Morgan Elsbeth with their plot. We start to see a little bit more of it unfold, and there's a lot there. We know there's a lot brewing, so there's a lot coming. But also, again, in the relationship of Ahsoka and Sabine, there's stuff brewing up from the past, right? There's stuff bubbling and boiling that will eventually have to come to the surface and will have to be dealt with. And so that's what we're going to focus on today.
That's just Tito wants you for parts.
Now, last week we did discuss a little bit, at least, communication. And I think this is going to be the biggest focal point for our discussion today, because what I saw in this episode, again, lots of plot and backstory and all that stuff to sift through, but what I really saw was the continuing tension between Ahsoka and Sabine, right? The I think struggle they're having right now, because there's, again, so much to catch up on. There was so much left unsaid. There was so many things that kind of went awry in the past, and I think the root of it is communication. We see an example of this pretty early on in the episode. In fact, in the opening scene, where we're in Sabine's hospital room, I guess, recovery room. I don't know what they call it there on Lothal, med bay, who knows? But we're in Sabine's recovery room because she, at the end of the previous episode, was attacked and seriously injured. So we open up with her actually having this fever. Well, it's not really a fever dream, but she's having flashback memories, dreams of being attacked. And thankfully Ahsoka is there, and Ahsoka senses it and wakes her up out of this dream state. So they start talking. Ahsoka expresses her concern, like, yeah, just relax, just take, rest up. You need to recover, et cetera, et cetera. And they start having a more conversation. Ahsoka starts asking about what happened, getting information about the attack and about the map that got stolen and who was there, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's still a mission, right? There's still a mission here. And so once Ahsoka gets all the information that she thinks she needs, she starts to head out to do further investigations at the site of the attack. At this point, as she's leaving, Ahsoka says, "Get some rest," and Sabine's response is, "Wait for me. You need my help," or something like that, right? "Wait, you need my help," and Ahsoka, as she's headed out, turns around and says, "No, you've done enough. Dun dun dun. You've done enough. Now this can easily be interpreted in many different ways. And again, it's all subtext, which is why I really love this interaction, and I love how they've written this relationship so far that we've seen in these first two episodes, because there is so much subtext between the conversations that Ahsoka and Sabine have, because again there's so much history there that we don't necessarily know about, but instead of just flat out telling us in exposition, they leave it in the subtext and the dialogue and the interactions between the two, which is, again, for me, beautiful writing, because that's for us to be able to discover and not just be told what happened. So the subtext is that, well, it could be easily be interpreted as Ahsoka caring about about Sabine's well-being. I mean, she knows that Sabine is just waking up, not fully recovered yet. She needs rest. You've done enough. But it could also be interpreted as, you've screwed up a lot. We lost the map. The bad guys have the map. You've done enough. Just stay here, right? Right. So it could easily be interpreted that way, and delivered beautifully by Rosario Dawson, because it's ambiguous. You know what I mean? It's up us to kind of interpret that and how we feel about it. I would wager that Sabine, it feels about it the second way, right? Like that she feels like she maybe that Ahsoka maybe is disappointed in her or even angry at her for letting her down. Further on in the episode, in a conversation with Hera, she even says, "Yeah, I mean, like, we haven't seen each other in years, and the first thing I do goes sideways," right? So there's this almost frustration that nothing is working out, and she screwed up, and she really it seems to me, at least, she really wants to fix things, or at least do something right for Ahsoka, given whatever happened in the past. So we get a sense that there's still this tension, or at least there's still some unresolved things between the two of them. And in fact, in this very same scene, this is the second hospital scene, as Ahsoka is once again leaving to chase down this lead on Corellia, she says, "No, you need to recover." Like she says to Sabine that, basically, "No, stay here. You don't need to go with us on this particular part of the mission. You need to fully recover." And again, I can see how Sabine can take that, not really the wrong way, but how can she can interpret that as saying that, or feeling that Ahsoka is still disappointed in her. Ahsoka still doesn't want her around, especially, again, given the history. And that's all subtext is in conversation and in language, right? It's saying something without saying it, and it's always informed and colored by the history that you have with the person that you're having a conversation with. It happens, and I think mostly we don't do that on purpose, and I don't think Ahsoka was necessarily doing it on purpose. There's a certain kind of expedience that she needs to, and expedience and efficiency that she needs to act and make decisions on, based on the mission, and especially based on all the information she has. I mean, she has the information about Corellia, but she also has information right in front of her that Sabine is not fully recovered yet, and that she's not ready. So she has to come to very, very quick decisions based on the information that she has. So I don't necessarily think that she's giving too much subcontext on purpose, but again, because of their history together, because of what happened in the past, Sabine might be reading it that way. Sabine might be reading it and taking things a little bit more personally, because again, the history that they have, and the tensions and the way they parted, right? So again, subtext and conversation happens as a result, often, more often than not, happens as a result of history that you have with the individual that you're speaking with. And it can go either way. It can be good or bad, or it could revolve around tension or things unsaid. But for me, Toil and Trouble are the conflicts and the tensions, the things that bubble up as a result of things unsaid, or as a result of things said unclearly, or even things that were said and misunderstood, right? When there's disconnect, or when things aren't communicated clearly, then there's always room for misunderstanding because there's so much subtext there in the history between the person or the people that you're communicating with and that you have relationships with. Subtext makes for great drama, right? For watching a TV show, it's great entertainment, and again, it drives the story forward via character development and the relationships between the characters. But in real life, when there are those things that are unsaid, or when there are those things that were said and misunderstood or not said clearly, that can create a lot of friction, and it is not very fun to go through in real life. So going back to last week's episode, I think the best thing that you can do, and this is something that I've tried to do my entire life, is to communicate as clearly as possible, and also to make sure, or to work as hard as you can, to make sure that there is understanding from other people in what you're trying to communicate. Right? It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that can necessarily be accomplished every time. But the less wiggle room you leave, the less space for subtext, the less possibility or chances of toil and trouble happening in the relationships that you have. So always do your best to seek understanding, both from the person that you're trying to communicate to, but also I think trying to seek understanding of the person that you're communicating with, right? That's, I mean, one of the most important parts of the communication process is if you don't understand what they understand, or if you don't understand what they're saying, then there's no way that you can communicate clearly your point of view and get them understanding. So it's a two-way streak. Obviously, it works better if both parties are trying to achieve understanding, but you can't always control that. So what you can control, again, is work to achieve that understanding. Now, I do want to distinguish that this is completely different from just getting your point across or just getting your opinion across, right? That's really more self-serving and is kind of a closed-off mode of communication. What I'm talking about is understanding from both parties, so that both parties can see the other person's perspective, right? It's the person that they're communicating with. Again, being able to come to an understanding isn't just expressing your opinion. It's being able to see others' opinions, or see their perspective, and why perhaps they feel a certain way, or why they think a certain way. If you're just trying to get your point across, or you're just trying to express your opinion, it generally is a more closed off conversation, and at the end of that, no understanding ever happens. Right? I mean, again, we see this happening all the time, and pretty regularly in modern life, especially the amount of communication that happens online and via comments, or via even chats. Right. So there are certain things that I would encourage you do to, number one, become a better communicator, but also have better communication. So let's just start with that second thing. Better communication, as much as possible, important conversations, try not to have those conversations over text, because texts and chats leave so much room for subtext, right? i.e. interpretation. And again, if there's history there, if there's conflict in your history between you and the person that you're chatting with, they can interpret your chats or your texts or your messages with all that subtext that they're carrying about you, right? And so as much as possible, again, important conversations. I'm a texter, I'm a messenger, but I leave very, very important conversations to actual conversations. Phone conversations or voice conversations are much better than text. If you can't be there in person, however, I would say, a FaceTime or something where they can see your face. I suggest removing as many of those barriers in the communication process as you can. And of course, it's common knowledge that communication is so much more than text. It's even so much more than your voice, even though that really helps, your intonation, your inflection. But so much of communication is nonverbal, right? Nonverbal. So At minimum, important conversations should happen over FaceTime, but as best as you can, have these really important conversations one on one in person. Then you can really feel where that other person is coming from, and you can communicate how you feel to that other person as well. That's really the best mode of well, conflict resolution for sure, but any important conversation that you need to have. I save important conversations to in person, but given that I'm, a million miles away from civilization, I live in the middle of nowhere. Then second best, and it's a little bit of a distant second best, but it's still second best, is doing a FaceTime type of video conversation. Now, as far as how to improve your ability to communicate, there's lots of things that I've done over the years that I think have really helped my ability to communicate ideas, my ability to communicate myself, and help other people gain understanding of what I'm trying to communicate. It's very, like, communication is very important to me. I think primarily because I suck at subtext. Like, I suck at subtlety in terms of understanding and catching people's cues. I can't read in between the lines, right? If somebody is not pretty straightforward with me, I won't know what you're hinting at. I've been bad at that my entire life. Like, I don't take hints because, like, well, you didn't communicate clearly. I mean, I don't understand, right? I don't know. Maybe you're good at taking hints, but I would prefer not to, because I really suck at taking hints. I really suck at reading subtext in person when I'm having conversation. So I think as a result of that, I've worked very, very hard to be a very clear, as clear as I can be, to be a very clear communicator. One of the things that has helped me over the years is reading. I know that sounds crazy, maybe for a lot of you. Even in my generation, I think there are many people that as soon as we're done with school, they stop reading. Reading. Some people read newspapers, magazines, but like really read things that expand your mind, especially things that expand your vocabulary and your use of syntax and grammar and language. For me, it's English is my primary language, but whatever language that is, really, like, one of the best ways to gain mastery over that language and therefore communicate your ideas with more of that language and better use of that language is through reading, right? I mean, that's pretty simple. And I hate to sound like a high school teacher or elementary school teacher, but reading is freaking fundamental, right? It's one of the best ways to just kind of continue to exercise your brain. And then the second way is writing, right? I don't journal as much as I used to. But I write a lot. I mean, even just for these episodes, right? For my two podcasts, I write a lot because I have to jot down my ideas, and so in that practice of writing, I am able to kind of synthesize and translate my ideas and these concepts that I have bouncing around in my head into language that hopefully people can understand. And so writing really helps. Journaling. I also encourage creative writing. I used to write a lot of poetry, and as an extension of that, I wrote a lot of songs. I'm a songwriter in a past life, right? So I think that really helped me in crafting language and using language in a way that isn't just rote or isn't just like mechanical, right? It allows you to catch more nuance and develop and create more nuance in your communication. So writing is an incredibly important part of communication, and it allows you to develop skills around language. Again, so those are the two things: reading and writing, and practicing talking to people. I have a lot of practice communicating verbally because it's been a huge part of my career. Communicating in presentations, communicating in sales, communicating on big platforms when I'm doing training, education, when I'm mentoring people, when I'm counseling with people, when I'm doing these episodes, right? So it's been a big part of my career, and so I've had a lot of practice with verbal communication as well. So these are things that I think everybody can do. Maybe not doing talking on platforms and even doing podcasts. But the reading and the writing part, it really is great exercise for your brain in terms of your use and mastery of language, right? Again, whatever that language happens to be. And if you can study a second or third language, that's even better, because it just expands your ideas, or it expands your brain in ways of communicating ideas in different contexts, right? In different languages. So yeah, that would be my suggestion, because again, it really is all about, I think for me, to alleviate and avoid as much as possible. It's not 100% possible, but to avoid tension and conflict with other people, especially with people that you care about and that you deal with often. It's really important to be a great communicator. Now, the other side of that equation isn't just communicating your message and your thoughts and your ideas, but it's understanding. So the second half of it is listening. And actually, it's not even half. I think listening is my superpower when it comes to communicating with other people, especially one-on-one. Again, it's been a huge part of my career as I mentor and as I counsel with people. It's more asking questions and really hearing them out and working to gain understanding of them and from them, not from them, but of them and of their situation, and of the things that they want to communicate, and so that I can then communicate back. But it is, in situations like that, I do more listening than anything else, and I think if you do that, people will really start to think of you as a great communicator. At the very least, they'll want to always be around you because you're a good person. They won't necessarily know why, but because you've taken the time to listen to them and to work to gain understanding. Then they're really going to appreciate that, even unconsciously, right? Even unconsciously. So you'll really, I think, strengthen a lot of connections if you develop and hone these aspects of communication. Obviously, the verbal part and communicating your own ideas, but the listening part is, I think, way more important. Listening and working to understand the person that's sitting in front of you. If we do this, I think it'll go a long way to helping us prevent and avoid conflict, especially again with the people that we care about the most. But also it will really help us resolve any conflict or tension that might currently exist. Thankfully, we see by the end of this episode that the barriers and the walls start to come down between Ahsoka and Sabine, and they start working together again. But until they work to gain clear understanding of each other through plain communication and leaving nothing unsaid, some degree of tension will always be there. They've got some work to do. But thankfully, we have Hera and Hu Yang. I actually completely forgot to talk about them and how they've been not only sounding boards, but they've been these outside perspectives, right? These kind of neutral parties helping guide and steer in an indirect way Ahsoka and Sabine to reconciliation. I love that this is kind of been their role in the last two episodes when it comes to this relationship, and no better characters to do it. I mean, first of all, Hu Yang is hilarious. I mean, he speaks as plainly as possible, so he's a really, really clear communicator, and I love that we were introduced to him in the series. But Hera has always been that as well. I mean, I feel like she's always been kind of this motherly figure, this voice of reason, this voice of guidance, and so between the two of them, they've been able to again give this outside perspective and kind of steer Ahsoka and Sabine into reconnecting and reestablishing those friendships and the relationship that they had prior to them having broken off or parting ways all those years ago. So yeah, communication. Hopefully that helps. I think, it expands the conversation from last week's episode, and I think one of my goals was to give more specifics on things that will help the communication process from your standpoint as a communicator, and conveying your ideas, but also as being a communicator in hearing messages and making sure that you understand what other people are trying to communicate to you. It's a practice for sure, and I encourage you to continue to work on it. Just be aware of it. I think that not enough people are aware of how they communicate and are aware of how they interact with people, and it just, I think, becomes more and more reactive as opposed to having really thoughtful and connective conversations. And I think that for me is the goal of for today's episode, and what I hope you work on doing, because I mean, again, I do that with you at the very least on a weekly basis. My goal is to always do that with you through the messages here on the show. Incredibly important stuff. I mean, communication is one of the things. Complex communication is one of the things that I think separates us from the other animals on this planet. And the better we get at it, I think the better things can be. And the worse we are at it, I think that is often the root of a lot of our conflict and friction and tension with others. Right? We are a social species, and so part of being a social species requires communication, and if we suck at communication, then those connections, the social ties that we have, are going to suck as well. So work at it. It is an ongoing process. I continue to work on my ability to communicate, and sometimes I'm great at it, sometimes I'm not. Some days I'm completely scatterbrained and have difficulty communicating myself. Some days I feel very succinct and relaxed in conveying my ideas, and also listening, and being able to gain full understanding of what others are communicating with me. So it just varies, but as long as you're working on it consistently, you'll get better over time. You'll get better at it over time, and you'll see perhaps, I think, less conflict and less friction in your life with the people that you're communicating with, right? Okay, I think I've beaten that dead horse. Let's move on to this week's shout out. Yep. This week's shout out goes to Andrew Luis, a really good friend of mine in New York. I got a chance to see him in this past weekend while I was up there, and in just a brief visit, I just this is a guy that I love, and mind you, let me backtrack. There are many people up in New York that I got a chance to sit with and spend time with and communicate with, who I hold dearly in my heart, and that I had such special times with. I got a chance to see a dear friend perform at the Blue Note in the West Village. It's a historic, it's an establishment, and like Blue Note's been around for forever in New York City. So my point is, among all the people that I saw, I've loved each and every one of them, and I cherish the time that I got to spend with them. But I can't give them all shout outs this week. So I choose to give Andrew specifically a shout out because I just had such an amazing time with him. I honestly, we don't get a lot of one-on-one time together, and I wanted to shine a light on him because he's kind of an unsung hero, right? His wife Romaine is also a dear friend of mine. She was very much responsible for me coming up there. She invited me to come up to speak at this event that she hosted. She coordinated, she put together all this stuff. Romaine is kind of the front of camera person, so to speak. Not literally, but she's the front of house person that you see a lot, right? And you interact with a lot. And Andrew's kind of he's behind the curtain. He's behind the scenes, and for that reason, he and I don't necessarily, like I said, get one-on-one time very often when I do these trips and I go visit to New York. pay visits to New York, but this time we did. He actually went out of his way one of the days that I was up there, and I didn't have much free time. I had a few, maybe like 2.5, 3 hours break window, and I was like, man, like if you're free, I would love to meet up. And he went way out of his way to come into the city, to come in Manhattan, to drive to Manhattan first of all. And take me around wherever I wanted to go, right? And just so he could spend time, because again, I mean, we're friends, but I also understand the headache and the work that it takes to drive around New York City, especially he lives in a completely different borough. He lives in Queens, so the effort and the trouble that he went through to just sit with me and be with me for an hour and a half, 2 hours, it means a lot to me, right? And it meant a lot to me, and it's just a testament to Andrew's character. Being such a stand-up guy, being such an amazing human being, just such a great friend, just willing to do these things that may not seem like big things, but they are big things to me. He took me, and this was part of our adventure I will always crack up at, and not to make fun of vegans or vegan restaurants, but he and I had never tried an all vegan restaurant. I'm not vegan, he's not vegan, but we wanted to try something new, right? Like, you could go to any old Joe Schmo restaurant where get the standard stuff, but like vegan stuff we've never tried, right? So we were adventurous enough, found a great vegan place in the West Village, and it was just such an adventure discovering this food, which I absolutely, we both loved, right? Like, we thought, we're like, wow, we were really impressed with these wings. They had buffalo wings that were vegan, right? And we had a few other things in the sampler platter that were completely vegan, but that they were kind of like meat type substitutes, you know what I mean? And it was like, wow, this is really delicious. So we had a hilarious time over that, a couple of beers, but leaving after, we were like, yeah, that was really good. And then out of nowhere, a minute or two of silence, Andrew was like, I'm gonna be hungry in half an hour. And I absolutely agreed. I was like, yeah, man, you're right. I'm gonna be hungry for in a half an hour. So it was just a joke. We didn't really mean it. But just given that we're meat eaters, and that was the first time we had gone to a vegan restaurant, that became our joke through the thing. So now we have this inside joke that I'm sharing with you, but we have this inside joke together that we'll always have about vegan restaurants. Again, not to make fun of vegan restaurants or vegan food, because it was an exceptional place. It was really, really good, but just that little added extra punchline at the end of Andrew saying that, yeah, I'm gonna be hungry at half an hour. It just it put a cap to the night of an incredible time that we got to spend together, as no matter how short it was. But basically, I just want to shine a light on Andrew. He is a behind the scenes guy. He's more the guy that stays in the back of the room, doesn't often get the light shined on him. So I want to take this opportunity to do that. All right, Andrew, I don't know if you're listening to this, but in case you do, this week's shout out goes to you. Okay, so a few more quick things before we close it out. Number one, a thought that I've had, and this goes back to kind of writing and doing creative writing and stuff. I started, this was years ago, but I started writing some fan fiction for Star Wars. I'm about 35, maybe 40 pages in, a couple of chapters, and it was a process I really enjoyed, but it's just that, I don't know, for me, number one, I think the main thing was I hit writer's block. I hit a point in the story where I just could not write past it. I know where I want the story to go, but this one specific detail I couldn't write past. Anywho, neither here nor there. I have a bunch of chapters, and I want to get back into writing. And I share this with you because I had a thought that I think would help keep me accountable to doing this and finishing this book out, is posting each chapter in online. Now, I know there are fan fiction places out there. Especially for Star Wars, there's lots of boards and stuff where you can post your fan fiction, and I'm thinking about doing that. So if you know of any good fan fiction places where you either somebody that writes fan fiction and posts there, or you consume fan fiction, let me know kind of where the places to go for this is, because I have no idea. You can just click the link in the show notes that says send me a text. You can let me know. But the other idea I had, instead of posting in those places, I was thinking about posting them on our Facebook page. We do have a Path of the Jedi Facebook page. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. If you're not there, you can follow us on Facebook. Join the I think it's a group page, if not a fan page. But either ways, follow the page. I post the blog post on there. The blog posts have the transcripts, etc., etc. I try to post some other stuff here and there, but it's I thought it would be a good place where I could provide you with more content, right? If you want more content from me, I think it would be a good place for me to post the fan fiction. And so, if you want to find that group page, again, I'll post the link in the show notes. It's on Facebook, so you'll have to get a Facebook if you don't have one. For me, from my end, I think it would really help me be accountable to to pick that fan fiction up again, and to continuing and eventually finishing the book. Okay, last thing. As usual, I want to ask you if you know one person, just one person, who you think would appreciate and enjoy this content. Please, please, please do me a favor and share this episode, share the podcast. My goal is to really grow this thing, and I can only do that with your help. I set this goal earlier this year, and I think I've said this in the past episodes, but my goal is to get 10,000 downloads a month, if not a week, but let's just go for a month. Even a month is a pretty lofty goal. But to get 10,000 downloads a month would be amazing, and I can only do that with your help. So again, if you know just one person who you think might appreciate and enjoy this stuff, enjoy the content, enjoy the messages, enjoy the ideas, the principles, and also who enjoys Star Wars, please send this episode and send the podcast to them. It would really go a long way to helping us grow, and go a long way to getting these messages out there into the world.
How you doing, you old pirate? So good to see you.
Okay, so that's going to do it for today. Thank you again for tuning in and for listening to the episode. Catch us next week with a fresh new one. So until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other, and may the Force be with you. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.